So, I have been a YouTube watcher for since YouTube came out, and content creators, they're not always honest. To be fair, people do say good things about Guild Wars 2 sometimes, and I personally am not trying to say Guild Wars 2 is perfect, but I have heard some serious recurrence of misinformation, and I've heard it like more than once. So I'm to the point where I'm like, I want to clarify. The reason the misinformation's annoying about Guild Wars 2 is because A, it's highly look-upable. Like, it takes almost no effort to see what the real information is, and it just shows a pure laziness on the part of the content creator for not even looking up stuff before they start talking about it. Like, why would you make a video and act like you're an authority on the matter, and then like the information that you're putting in there is either partial information or else just outright bogus? Secondly, it irritates me when misinformation is spread about Guild Wars 2, because it's like people take their personal experience with an MMORPG and they apply it to all MMORPGs. And Guild Wars 2 is not typical for MMORPGs. I've played almost every MMORPG that's ever existed, and Guild Wars 2 has definitely got its uniqueness going on, and people will come to this game and be like, oh, well, since this is how it was in this game, and this game, then obviously it's how it will be in this game, and that's just not true. So, here's some things that I genuinely feel are just outright misinformation spread about Guild Wars 2. And, again, not every content creator does this, but way too many of them do. So, the first thing is that there are years between expansions. People say that a lot. I hear people say, oh, Ended Dragon seems to be doing pretty well, but it was 3 years until it came out. So what does that say? And it's like, yes, there were 3 years between Path of Fire and End of Dragons. Super true. But what is not true is that inference that's made by that. It is completely irresponsible to say, oh, it was 3 years between expansions, and act like that means there was some sort of a content drought. There is a crap load of content that came out during that time in the Living World seasons, and just like between Path of Fire and Heart of Thorns, there was Living World season. And Living World seasons are like mini expansions. And between Path of Fire and End of Dragons, there were 2 Living World seasons, and both of them were just a sheer expanse of content. Like, extra mounts added to the game, extra types of currencies and abilities and mastery points, and strike missions came out, which are basically kind of like trials in Final Fantasy XIV. Where it's just, you go in, you kill the boss, you don't have to kill a whole bunch of ads beforehand, you know? There was also Dragon Strike missions, there was tons and tons of new maps that were added with all this content, more storyline added with all this content, crazy good rewards and achievements, and like just a ridiculous volume of content came out between Path of Fire and End of Dragons. So saying, oh, yeah, there was 3 years between the expansions, and failing to mention the volume of content between those two things is just stupidly irresponsible to me. Like, it's misinformation. It makes it sound like nothing happened between Path of Fire and End of Dragons, which is just completely and totally false. So, all you have to do is look for even 4 seconds, And again, you might be used to in your MMO that the only time content comes out is if there's a patch or there's an expansion. But that doesn't mean that's how it is for every other game. Tons of games have DLCs and things like that, and you can't say, oh yeah, nothing happened between expansions if a ton of content's actually just mind-blowing to me. Anyway, the next thing is people like to say that this game is free to play, and they say that a lot for some reason, and I'm not sure where they got that concept. The base game is free to play to try out the game. But when you're doing the base game free-to-play stuff, it has the same things that any other trial would, where, for instance, you have limitations on what kind of chats you can talk in, or using the trading post, or sending mail, things like that. There's absolutely limitations to it. This game is pay to play. You buy it in the first place, you buy the expansions in the first place, and then you are free to play it as much as you want, however much you want. I'm not sure why people say it's free to play. It is free to play the base game to try it out, but even that has limitations on it, just like it would any trial for any MMORPG. So, yeah, people like don't seem to understand buy a game once and play it forever. In the MMORPG community, like in general, they seem to be like, oh, it's either free to play or subscription model, and that's the only two things that exist, and that's just not actually true. There is a third option. People like to say it's free to play so that they can spread misinformation about how, oh, obviously, since it's free to play, it just has microtransaction. Or it has a store model where you just buy stuff and they're just nickel and diming you for every thing that you get. And that's not how the store model works in Guild Wars 2. It's actually pretty universally considered to be one of the most fair and honest store models in any MMORPG, period. It does not have a subscription, but you can't, like, buy upgrades from the gem store that are, like, you know, going to do anything for your combat or anything like that. It's almost entirely cosmetics or else, like, convenience stuff, like having infinite gathering tools instead of gathering tools that can break and you know, re-get them in-game. You can buy an infinite gathering tool. Or instead of using salvage kits that have limits, you can buy an infinite salvage kit. Like, you know, convenience items. Guild Wars 2 also has a integrated in-game system for trading gold to gem and gems to gold. And people like to say, oh, well, that means it's pay to win then, because you can buy all the best gear on the trading post then. And that's not true either. Almost every form of best item in the game there is, except weapons. All your armor, your trinkets, your rings, your back items, all of those kinds of things, those are all earned. 100% of them you have to earn yourself. You cannot just get them purchased off the trading post and now you're decked out. And quite frankly, the only ones that you can do are Generation 1 and Generation 3 legendary weapons. Even Generation 2 legendary weapons, you have to earn them. You cannot purchase them. On top of that, legendary weapons are on par stat-wise with ascended weapon. And ascended weapons you have to earn. You can't just go on the trading post and buy them. So if you want to jump into, like, say, hardcore raiding or something, and you need ascended gear, or maybe you're really into a certain legendary and you want to craft the legendary, that's gonna be something you have to put time and effort and energy into. It's not gonna be something you can go to the trading post and buy. Now, you can go to the trading post and buy exotic gear, but exotic gear is not the top stats in the game. Almost all of the coolest skins are unlocked in the game almost all of the coolest, like, whatevers are unlocked in the game. All mounts, 100% of mounts are unlocked in the game by earning them. You can get mount skins to put on your mounts in the gem store, but you can't actually buy a single mount or a way to cheese getting the mount from the gem store. So it's very frustrating to hear misinformation spread about that the game like microtransactions you to death or something. That's just not true. And people are like, oh, when you go to do anything the gem store, you're gonna have to look at it. Okay, well, it's literally a click away. Like, it's not a big deal. And I have quite a few gem store upgrades, but I earn them. So I earn in-game gold, and then if I want to go to the gem store and say I want to buy this extra life donation thing, I do buy it every year. But I would just go to currency exchange, switch up my gold into some gems, and just buy it. Like, it's not something that I necessarily have to go swipe a credit card for. Now, if I wanted to, I could, but the reality is that that particular purchase is pure donation anyway, that they do the extra life thing every year, and it's a charity thing. So it's probably a bad example because that particular purchase is for charity. But, you know, if it was a different item that was in the gem store, it would be the same diff except not charity. So, but I could still just earn some gold and buy it that way. Or if I don't want to spend some time earning gold, I can buy it with real life money. It's not a big deal. The biggest thing is that you don't just get everything handed to you in Guild Wars 2. It's just not how it works. You have to earn a lot. And because you have to earn a lot, you get rewarded, like, very well for earning. The things that you earn are satisfying. It takes a lot of effort to craft a legendary, so when you get your legendary, you feel really good about it. It's not pure microtransaction hellhole like mobile games are or something. Calling it a free-to-play game and getting down on them because they have a item store is misinformation. It's not being honest to how it actually... You can say they have a gem store, sure, that makes sense, and then if you don't say anything else, it automatically is completely making giant assumptions and leaps instead of being honest. The part of, you know, getting rewarded for everything is achievement points. And in this game, when you get achievement points, unlike most every other MMORPG I've ever played, you get rewarded as your achievement points go up, and it unlocks permanent account bonuses where you get slowly a little bit more gold per kill, a little bit more karma gained from events, experience, blah, 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 blah. I have seen people, onto misinformation item number 3, I guess 4, and mix the last 2 together. I have seen people complain about that essentially people who have played the game for a super long time have way more achievement points. And some of those achievement points are from doing their daily achievement points or being part of like holiday events, and each year you can get a certain amount of achievement points, or each day a certain amount of achievement points, and those achievement points are earned, but people get complaining about it. And it's really strange to me when I hear people say, hey, this person, you know, has played since the very beginning of the game, so obviously they're going to have like 4,000 achievement points at least from doing their dailies every day, and then say another like 2,000 achievement points from doing the holiday events every year. And there should be a way for new people who just started playing to get those achievement points and get them handed to us from something else. I hear that, and I'm just like, what? And they're like, it's an unfair advantage. And I really don't get that, because would you say that someone who, say in Final Fantasy XIV, had for years and years and years, like, accumulated a ton of currency, and now they have way more currency than you, should you just get it handed to you? If you were in World of Warcraft and someone had a ton of tokens from years of playing, and they were getting, like, all the old stuff bought with tokens and not even having any issues or something, you know, from, like say they had already done all content from Wrath of the Lich King, and they did it during the Wrath of the Lich King, and they did the entirety of all of it. And so they have all that loot, and now you have to go to the Argent tournament and start from scratch, and it's going to take forever to get all those rewards. Should you just get them handed to you? The thing is they didn't just get those rewards because they happened to have an account that was there that long. They got them because they actively did stuff. Proof of it is my account is as old as it is possible to have an account be old for Guild Wars 2. But I do not have all those achievement points. I took a couple of breaks from the game, and even though my account is that old, I don't have all of the same achievement points that I would have had if I had logged in, put in effort, did my dailies, played every holiday event, and actually gotten all of those achievement points. So do I resent the people who actually did log in, did play, did do that? No, I don't resent that at all. Do I think that they have an unfair advantage because they put effort into the game when I wasn't putting effort into the game? No. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not an unfair advantage. They earned that advantage. Like, they literally came and played and got achievement points. Kudos to them. They liked the game enough to keep playing, to keep enjoying themselves, to keep supporting the game. Like, why wouldn't they get a pat on the back? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It is completely false to say that they have, like, this big, giant, huge thing that's unfair. That's just not true. Another thing I see a lot, because people go and they start playing the game and they try the free-to-play version first, the trial, right? They're on that. They think that that's what story content is like. So they do the personal story, and it starts, and you've got, like, a character on this side, a character on this side with watercolor scenery in the background, and they're like, oh, this is a really different way of telling story. At least it's voice acted. That's nice. And they assume that that's what the story content is like, when in actuality, that's only the personal story. Zero story content in the entire game is done that way, besides your personal story, which is the story from level 10 to level 80. And you don't even have to do your personal story if you don't want to do all the other story content. All the other story content has cutscenes and active interaction with other characters and NPCs, and you are running around doing stuff as the story's unfolding. It's not done that same way at all. So it's really... It's just nuts to me that people play basically the free-to-play trial base game, and they're like, oh yeah, there we go. I know what story is, and that's just not true. The story content is nothing like that. So when you make a video and you're like, oh, I tried out Guild Wars 2 and this is what the story's like, you are proving that you didn't do anything but download the free-to-play trial version, and you thought that you somehow did something amazing by doing it. And you didn't research anything at all. The next thing that I find that is like definitely a misinformation. Yay, evaded. I play worse when I'm talking. Anyway, is that they go do the story content in the free-to-play version, and they think that that's what leveling up is like too. And this one's difficult because a lot of times people actually have a lot that's positive to say about the 1 to 80 leveling experience. They actually are like, oh wow, you know, you run around exploring in the world, all these events constantly pop up that are just, you know, you helping rescue a city, or wow, you know, you were standing AFK and you come back and all of a sudden bandits took over, or whatever it is. Like, this is really exciting, you know, and my 1 through 80 experience is like, even people who don't do the story, you know, it's like, oh hey, I'm map completing and this feels nice, and this is how I level up, and this is what leveling up is like in the game. And I'm glad that people maybe come from a more boring leveling up experience and enjoy that, but that's not what leveling up is like in the game at all. That's what leveling up 1 through 80 can be like, but you can do almost anything in the entire game and get experience. And that's the leveling up experience doesn't technically really start until you hit level 80. Until you get to the mastery system, you're not actually going to be leveling like a real leveling system. And the mastery system is really fun, but the mastery system is expansive. Like, it's huge because you get new masteries not just every expansion, but also, again, with the new content in Living World seasons, you get it more masteries in that too. And you level up the ability to be able to even put in mastery points. Once you've leveled all of those masteries, then every level up gives you spirit shards, and you can use the spirit shards in the Mystic Forge to help yourself. And then leveling up also is separated by, if you're doing PvP, they have separate levels for PvP, and then if you're doing world versus world, there's separate levels for that too. And so it's not as straightforward as level 1 to level 80. And I see a lot of people being like, oh, I'm gonna try this game, and when they try the game, in actuality, they're completely missing like the majority of the content. And I guess that's where a lot of the misinformation comes from, is people just try playing up to like level 40 or something in the free-to-play trial version of the game, where you can touch any of the base game that you want, but it has like limitations, and they think that that's what the game is like. And that's just not true. That's not what the game is like. The game can be like that if you choose, but there's so much more than just that. If you very first start playing the game, it might feel that way, but very quickly, like in less than a month, your gameplay is going to change significantly, and the expectation for the game and how it plays shouldn't be just this initial starting stuff. It's just, the leveling experience is totally different. You still are leveling when you go to new content, and just because you're not getting to level 80 doesn't change that you're leveling. Anyway, the last and probably biggest misconception that it's like a pet peeve at this point that people spread about Guild Wars 2 is they'll preface it with information too. They'll be like, oh, you know, this game has an event system that other games copy, or oh, it has the best mounts in the whole MMO, you know, like genre period, and other games copy it. You know, all this stuff. They'll say that first, like trying to butter you up, and then they'll say, but you know, the game's got really low numbers, or the game's dead, or the game just doesn't really have the population, or whatever. Um, that's so not true. And it used to be the game is dead, and now it's like, oh, the game's getting a tiny bit of rejuvenation because there's some players playing it now. And it's like they're trying to pat the game on the head for being a good boy and doing something right. And the game has never, and certainly is not, dead. That's just not true. Um, Even if you go on a map and say you get onto the map and you're like, wow, there's not a lot of people there on the map. It's probably because you're on an overflow map, and there'll be people joining that map soon. The reality is that you're going to play this game and be surprised that people say it's dead, because almost everywhere you go, it feels like an MMORPG. I have played so many MMOs, and almost none of them get the massively multiplayer online part right. A lot of them get the RPG part right. A lot of them get the, you know, story and having an engaging world part right, but feeling like it's a actual massively multiplayer game, they get that terrible. They make you feel like everything's in an instance, everything is small, everything is something that you're doing with like just 5 other people or 10 other people and then by yourself. And Guild Wars 2, even if you are playing totally by yourself, you're never really, hardly ever, playing by yourself. You're actually playing with a sea of other players. I have my player count, because of streaming and recording and stuff, set to low. So every time you set it to go smaller, you're able to see and load fewer and fewer characters. So right now, you can see maybe like 30 characters, 25 characters, whatever it is. In actuality, that's the lowest possible setting for this, which means that it goes to low, and then medium, and then high, and then highest. So basically, I'm seeing a fourth of how many players are actually playing right now, because I, again, lowered the settings down so that I can record. So there's it's just like nuts to me how anyone can look at how many people there are on your screen and say, oh yeah, this game feels dead. It's not dead at all. The game has had hundreds of thousands of players its entire lifetime for over 10 years. At its minimum, at its very smallest amount of population, it was still hundreds, at least, I believe it's at least 300,000 strong. Like, as active players. I could be wrong about that, though. It might be 250. At its very lowest population of active users. So it's like, sure, it's not World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV, where it's like so massively big that it's like, oh yeah, we've got like, you know, millions of users all concurrent at the same time going into the game. I do get that. I'm not saying it's the same as those two exceptions, but like almost no MMORPGs are like that. Like, you look at even other MMORPGs that are considered to be like a success, or that are considered to have like a really devoted fan base. Like, you look at games like Elder Scrolls Online, or BDO, or Star Wars The Old Republic, or like, just, you can pick any MMORPG almost. Like, they're all pretty much on par with each other population-wise, and yet Guild Wars 2 is somehow dead or dying. And that's so strange to me. There almost no MMORPG ever has or will know the levels or degrees of success that a World of Warcraft or a Final Fantasy XIV knows. Those games are the exception, not the rule. MMORPGs are almost always a population of like a couple 100,000, and that's considered to be successful. Like an MMORPG is considered to have done well if it can get over 300,000 congruent players in have them be active players. It's considered to be like a good job. And so it's really strange to me that this game in particular has never ever had a tiny player base, like ever. And yet it's the one that's called dead. And it's just stunning to me. Like, it's such a misinformation. Now, what's really funny to me is right now, currently, in MMO, like, across the board, every MMORPG there is has been bleeding players, like, in a trend, except for Final Fantasy XIV and old school RuneScape, basically. For the majority part for, like, the last several years. And Guild Wars 2 is the only other one besides Final Fantasy XIV and old school RuneScape that you can say is like growing in numbers. Guild Wars 2 is actually a growing population instead of a failing population. And these other MMORPGs, even World of Warcraft, have been having smaller and smaller populations, and you're going to call Guild Wars 2 dead when it's one of essentially 3 major MMORPGs that have a growing population. A population that's not in a massive dive. That's so funny to me. Like, really ridiculously funny to me. I don't get the point of spreading misinformation about games in general. Like, looking things up or trying to find out more information about them is not a bad thing. And if you're going to be a content creator and you're going to talk about, like, a wide variety of games, like, you know, I like to watch YouTube videos sometimes where they're like, hey, I'm going to compare these 3 games to each other. Or, hey, here's the top, you know, 10 games that still already existed and how they're doing and everything for 2022, whatever it is. And then they say such stuff. Guild Wars 2 is often in there, but they'll say such, like, oddball stuff, and then it makes me question the content that they're saying about everything. It makes me wonder, well, do you know what you're talking about for any of these games? If you're saying stuff that's so inaccurate and so much just partial truths or, like, half-hearted effort, how much effort did you really put into the whole video or into understanding any of these games? Should I take your word for it for any of the games that you're comparing here? Or, again, that you're saying, oh, are the games that, you know, are still doing well in 2022 or 2023 or whatever it is? It's like an automatic way to discredit yourself. And me, even if I don't know something for sure, like, for instance, I admit I don't remember what the lowest population for Guild Wars 2 was. I admitted it might have been something else than what I originally said. At least I'll admit that that's a possibility. They'll just state it like it's a fact, and they'll just be like, oh yeah, this is exactly how it is, and this is exactly the truth, and they state it so matter-of-factly, when in actuality, they didn't look it up, and they don't admit that they might be wrong. I admit, I might be wrong, but, like, I'll admit, I didn't bother to look up the exact number because I looked it up at one point, I don't remember exactly what it was, and I'm already recording. But, like, they're not honest about it. They don't do that. And it bothers me so much. Like, so much. I look at how much misinformation there is about Wars 2, and it makes me really sad because, unfortunately, the game's not perfect. It actually does have flaws and things that could be pointed out, and you're wasting space where you could be honest about some of the things that it could do better by spreading misinformation about things that it is already doing that actually aren't so bad. Like, you could be using your platform to make things better for the game. You could be using your platform to explore other games and explore different ways of thinking a game. I find a lot of people when they first start Guild Wars 2, because they're so used to like the gear grind, it's really difficult for them to adjust. Because in this game, once you get to a certain degree of rarity in your gear, you really don't need to grind gear anymore at all. You can do 94% or so. That's a made-up estimate, but it's probably pretty accurate. Pretty decently close to accurate. You can do like 94% of content in the game in exotic gear. Like, you don't even have to have the top gear to be able to do it, because there will be other players. It won't just be you running around by yourself struggling to do something. I've seen people go into World versus World in exotics. PvP, it doesn't matter. It's balanced and everyone has the exact same gear options, period. For PvE, your open world bosses and giant meta events that are map-wide, huge armies taking over a whole map, like this one right here, which, by the way, this map right here is part of a living world season and not part of an expansion that I'm playing on right now. Because again, they're basically like a miniature expansion. You get new maps, but basically you become an army of players and you push through and force more and more bosses to come out until you get to one big giant final boss. That's a meta. All those sorts of things you can absolutely do in exotics. You can do dungeons in exotics. You can do all of the tier 1 fractals in exotics. You can do most of the like training raids and stuff like that in exotics. You don't have to have like the best gear in the game unless you're wanting to do harder fractals, harder, raid content, harder strike missions. Like if you're gonna do a challenge mode strike, you gotta have some better gear than exotics, unless you are just super skilled and somehow manage to not stand in any. It's impossible to go up in fractals in exotic gear. After a certain point, you just gotta have Ascended / Legendary. Because again, Legendaries and Ascended have the same stats. But, like, the game has you playing with other people who help each other. All content is content you can do together, hang out together, even story instances. You can go into them with friends. You don't have to go by yourself. So, no, the game's not dead. And yes, the game has issues. So let's talk about the real issues instead of spreading nonsense about stuff that's already going on in the game. Oh man, flatbread. Let's be honest. Let's actually tell the whole story. That's just how I feel about any content made for any game. You should be telling the whole story. I get this, chat. Yay. Feel free to point out if you feel like that, you can think of other things that there's a lot of misinformation about, or that you feel like wasn't true. But these are the big things that I could think of personally. And that I've seen repeatedly. And the biggest one that I see the most often is, no one plays this game, so why would you? And that's just... that's just so far from the truth.